And welcome back to League Talk. On today's episode, we have a bunch of really interesting stuff to talk about. We're going to be talking about anti-tilt and relaxation with a focus on the now. Now, that sounds really weird, but we will get into what tilt is and how it's not particularly useful, and then some tips on how to deal with it, how to be present, and how to focus on the now. But first, obviously, League Talk, the podcast all about League of Legends, all about management, and all about coaching. My name is AJ. And let's get straight into it. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is how tilt, what it is, understanding it, and how knowing that it's not a particularly useful word, then moving on from that. So tilt obviously isn't particularly useful because what does it really mean? It doesn't talk about an awful lot of useful stuff. It's not a descriptive word. It's not really a verb. I don't know what it is. But firstly, the ideal state to be in when performing is arguably the flow state, and people often refer to this as being in the zone. Now, the flow state can be characterized by positive nature, full immersion, and blocking out anything else with little conscious thought about the actions that you are doing. Now, neuroscientist Brett Vinger, I hope I'm saying that right, refers to it as simply a state of relaxed high performance. So, one of the things that is important to block out in League of Legends is the crowd. That's one thing if you're playing on stage, for example. Unnecessary stimuli, so that could be the noise of cars, or it could be knowing that your jungler is in the top lane, you're the ADC. Now that's a stimuli that you don't have to worry about because the jungler's not there. You can now push your lane advantage, you can be aggressive, whatever that may be. Tilt majoritively actually comes from focusing too much on the past and future and not enough of a focus on the now, the ability to be present and to focus on the present. Now, the focus on the past can be thinking about the mistake that happened or the play that caused tilt. So for example, my jungler just came top, he just fed a kill over, now my lane opponent has one extra kill. How am I going to deal with that? Whilst the focus on the future can be where you think that the game is just unwinnable, for example, due to mistakes or tilt, pushing negativity generally is just as a way of thinking. But the important thing to remember is if you focus too much on the past or the future, you're not focusing on the now. And why that is so key can be a lot to do with future-proofing, right? So therefore moving from a focus of the past or future to the present can go some way to dispel tilt. However, just saying be present isn't particularly useful. Therefore, I've put together some tactics to help with this. The most important thing to do is to remember on how to win and focus on that. And focus on the game from now, the current position you are in, but we will touch on this later. So, the first tip to be present. In-game, you can think about being mindful. Now, mindfulness is as an idea is all about being present. It's all about focusing on the now. But you can do this by just taking notice of your body. So you can feel your fingers on the mouse, on the keyboard, your feet on the floor, your body contacting the chair that you're sitting on. Another good way to be mindful is just to practice cleaning your desk. That's a really good way. So currently my desk is a bit cluttered and it's distracting me. So the ability to be present enough to move that around to focus on the now and focus on your desk whilst focusing on the game, or sorry, not focusing on your desk while you can focus on the game, is really important. There's some really good books. There's Mindfulness, I think it's called Mindfulness 365. I've got a book over there. It's like how to be mindful. It gives you tips and ways to be mindful. One really good way is to, every time you open a door, put your hand on the handle, and just at the moment your hand contacts the handle, take all of that information in, open the door, and sort of pass through. You're focusing on now. You're focusing on your hand on the handle rather than focusing on just getting from A to B. That's a really good way to do it as well. But another way is obviously meditation and breathing. We've spoken about this a bunch on the podcast and the videos. Meditation may be an oversight to say, but breathing exercises in its simplicity is the right way for me to do it. I'm not very good with meditation, but I prefer to use the 4-1-4 technique, where you inhale in your nose for 4 seconds, you pause for 1 second, and then breathe out through your mouth for 4 more seconds. It just flushes your body with more oxygen, sort of like a Wim Hof method in a really not quite such an aggressive way. But yeah, the 4-1-4, if that's too much, you can always do 3-1-3, so 3 seconds in, 1 second pause, 3 seconds out. That's a really good way to do it, because the meditation and breathing is really good for just calming you down, for focusing on the moment. once you've taken a big breath, it's all out. Maybe you can imagine expelling some of the issues that you've got with the game. So breathing in, the jungle is inted, the jungle is inted, breathe out, and it's all gone. Maybe something like that might be pretty useful. But this is the most important one. And this is something, of course, you can think about. Exercise will help prevent tilt, and nutrition will help prevent tilt. Those are really good ones, but we'll talk about out-of-game stuff in a little bit. But what we're going to talk about now is what I like to call extremely micro goal setting. Now, I'm not calling it short-term because short-term doesn't actually do it justice. Short-term can often refer to a day or two or by midday or something like that. This is like literally within 30 seconds, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. If these techniques are not very useful, the above ones, so breathing, meditation, and mindfulness, which is understandable because a lot of people aren't into that sort of stuff, there is a real stigma around those techniques. I do recommend that you give them a go, but if you can't do them, if you really think that these won't be so useful, maybe this will be a lot better. This is a lot more of a tangible solution to it, right? So goal setting is a wonderful way to stay present if the goals are very micro. Obviously, if you start talking about long-term goals, you're going to focus on the long-term rather than the short-term. But what I mean by this is goals during the game that are easy to tick off, right? And it's incredibly important to focus on what you can do to win the game now. Not 5 minutes ago, not 10 minutes later. What you can do now to put in place to help you win the game. From our current position, that's a really good way to think about it. You are not from the ideal position 9 times out of 10, because the ideal position is your whole team's carrying you don't have anything to do with it, or it's just your team is playing perfectly to their win conditions. That's ideal, but how many times does that really happen? And we hold our in our heads this ideal all the time, like, if bot lane hadn't gone 0-2, if Lucian was ahead and he'd got 20 more CS on the Ezreal, because he should do, because Lucian's more lane dominant, or Draven, for example. You are on the position now, which is your Lucian isn't ahead, your Draven isn't ahead, or your jungler isn't doing very well, your top laner isn't doing very well. So when I say extremely micro goal setting, I mean that they're easy to tick off and they're playing into your win conditions, and they are within the next sort of minute increments, for example. So a good way of thinking about this is, whilst we are behind, I can farm my jungle camp safely and we can turtle until everyone gets 2 items. Now that's a win condition, right? And these are goals like that, which are, for the next 10 minutes I want to farm my jungle camps. I don't want to focus on anything else other than that, is a really good way to do it. And these goals should be pertaining to your win conditions. So assessing your win conditions is, I'm sure, something that everyone can do. But a win condition might be that we need 3 items because that's our team's power spike and we can team fight off of that. Or your win condition means that we have a Camille and a Rise, and that means you have to play a 1-3-1 because that's the right way to play that composition. But breaking the game down into 1, 3, 5, 10 minute segments to get your win condition is the best way to really get where you want to be. And win conditions are always in flux, of course. They are not something that is constant, just because of the way the game works. So for example, in tennis, if you thought your route to win was through your serve and you will always win your service game, but you drop 2 service games, you must consider your ways back into the game to control things that you can control. Another problem with tilt that people often have is that they're trying to control things that just are uncontrollable. The truth of the matter is, my last game I played Olaf and I went 9-5-18, I believe. Unfortunately, my mid and bot didn't play very well, so we lost the game because of that. In the realest sense, that game was probably a loss. I can think all about what I should have done better. Maybe I shouldn't have got 9 kills. Maybe I should have been donating those kills, as Olaf doesn't scale particularly well. But sometimes you do just have to accept that this is an uncontrollable. I'm not going to be able to do anything about this, and this game might just be lost now. But it's best to think that after the game. So not in the game, we've lost. After the game, this was uncontrollable, never mind. But in that tennis scenario, maybe your new win condition is to play cross-court, as their footwork and CV strength is poor. So moving them around the court and forcing them onto a plethora of different shots. So playing forehands, playing backhands, doing volleys. All of that might be the best way to win the game. Now obviously in League of Legends there are so many different win conditions. There are so many different ways the game can go. But that tennis example hopefully helps people understand. A good example for League of Legends might be you load into the game and you've got a really strong early game bot side of the map, but your top side is pretty weak. So as a jungler, you're looking at that. You want to snowball your early side and make sure your top lane can be safe at least. So maybe some good vision, some good warding around the top side might be a way to do that. But making sure that your Draven has got off to a good start in the game, because he's a Draven Thresh lane which is really strong up until level 6, let's say. I don't know if it goes past that, to be honest with you. But unfortunately Draven Thresh got ganked level 2 by the Jarvan with red buff, so they're now behind. Now my win conditions are to try and make sure that Draven can get back into the game, for example. It might even be, right, bot lane isn't doing so well, so I'm going to try playing through mid. My Rise can scale well into late game, and that's going to be my win condition from now, rather than focusing on the early game of Draven. Win conditions are in flux, the game is always in flux, it's not an easy one to comment on all the time. And then out of game, that's the next thing that we'll talk about. Basically this is what you can do to create a better mindset going into game, or after the game is finished before playing another one. So one thing that you can always do is take short breaks. You go get water, food, exercise, anything like that. Another one, of course, is exercise. So you might go to the gym rather than going for a light walk or something like that. Making sure you can sleep for about 8 hours is really, really important. And another good way to stay present is gratefulness journaling. One of the best tips to be present, but can be a bit wishy-washy. A good way to gratefulness journal is every morning when you wake up, write down 3 things you're grateful for. Try and make them micro and macro, so short-term and long-term. So it could be, I'm grateful that there's a roof over my head, but I'm also grateful that this morning I woke up at 6:30 and I didn't struggle as much as I thought I would be. Those can be some really good tips as well, and that's all about getting you present. But that sort of sums up everything that I wanted to talk about. We understand Tilt a little bit better, what it comes from, how you can start to focus too much on the past and not enough on the present, or the future, focusing too much on the future as well. We then got into some tips of being present, so mindfulness, meditation, then extremely micro goal setting. Of course, focusing on what you do now to win rather than what we did 5 minutes ago to win is a really good way of doing that. And then out of game, we're going to take short breaks. You can exercise, you can make sure you've got enough sleep, and you can be gratefulness journaling. So those are my tips. This is about anti-tilt, about relaxation. Not so much in relaxation, but more of the focus on the now. But these techniques will also help you with relaxing and will therefore help you with untilting. So I hope you've enjoyed that. If you have any questions, if you want to get in touch with me, at leaguE Talk Show is on Twitter. That's the best way to do it. But I hope you have enjoyed the episode. I hope there's been a bunch of value that you've got from this, and I hope you have a wonderful day.